Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. Whether you're watching us on X or YouTube or Rumble Premium, ultimately our home is Rumble, and we hope that you will join us there for a fantastic show that includes a conversation with Gregg Hurwitz, a writer, philosopher and political thinker who's fascinated with the way that potentially we could bring America back together again. Let me know in the comments and chat whether that's even a desirable outcome. We'll be talking about pluralism, diversity and variety, subjects that are significant and important if ever you want America to again be a united States of America. We're going to be talking as well about Trump's declaration that women's sports will be protected and the complexity that emerges extraordinarily from such a decree. If you don't have Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now. If you use the code BRAND, then we will definitely be acknowledged for that support, and you will get additional content from me and Stephen Crowder and Dan Bongino and Glenn Greenwald. I want to say hello to those of you watching us on Locals. We will continue to give you additional content like Break Bread with Russell Brand, where I have fascinating conversations with Christians, but there's more to life than that if you're a member of our Locals community or Rumble Premium. You get all sorts of fantastic content. Here's just an example.
We're on our way to the Ocean Church, where I've been asked to... I actually don't even know what I've been asked to do.
Do you know, I'd forgotten how this had happened. I was thinking, why is it that I am here? And then Michael said, you met Becky in Seaside. I was like, yeah, I remember that. And then you did a video where you spoke and said, Pastor Michael. I was thinking, yes, this did all happen. And now I'm here. These actions have consequences. I've not been Christian very long, like 8 months, like since April the 28th. So you all know more about this than I do. So inadvertently, I'd been worshipping false idols, the false idol of fame. And if you do something like that, if someone's more famous than you, then you might feel inferior because you've invested. It was Benedict Cumberbatch is who it was. In England, it's like they've tried to make Jesus boring. No disrespect to the Church of England, because I've met some brilliant and beautiful people in the Church of England since coming to our Lord, and they've educated me and they've held me and they've instructed me beautifully. But overall, it seems like in England, they're trying to make Christianity seem like it's boring. And like when you read from Genesis to Revelation, there's fire and power and angels and demons and resurrection, and amidst us now, beyond the limitations of our senses, surely if we could but see with new eyes, we would know that we are surrounded even now, that they are among us, our guardian angels and other forces yet, which if we do not submit might... So get Rumble Premium if you want more additional content like that. Tomorrow, Lara Logan and Neil Oliver will be with me for Russell Brand Stay Free Oracles, and we'll be talking about the biggest stories of the week. We've got Gregg Hurwitz coming up, but before that, let's talk about perhaps the defining political issue of our era. Donald Trump has signed an executive order protecting women's sports and female sports. One of the moments that changed my perspective on this subject was this simple question: why have women's sports at all? Why have them? Because presumably it's a separate category in some way, and some biologists believe that at every measurable level there are differences between men and women, whether that's bone density or their blood or their hair or it's just completely measurable. Having said that, as a spiritual man and a believer in God, there are some things that cannot be measured, something like essence, some subtle forms of energy that are difficult to discern using purely material means. So how does the issue of gender get used in the culture? How is it deployed by both sides of the cultural argument to push home their claims for moral superiority? One of the people that's been very outspoken on this issue from the get-go is JK Rowling. She made this post about Donald Trump signing the executive order protecting women's sports. Now, that is notable for a number of reasons. For one thing, Donald Trump is surrounded by female children and isn't sniffing any of them on the head. That seems to be an advance for presidential politics, if nothing else. Let's have a look at the legacy media news coverage of Donald Trump signing that executive order before discussing more generally gender and women's sports and how this issue gets used politically to divide people and obfuscate truth.
You know, if you'd like to gather around me, I think I'm going to be okay. Come on. Come on.
Wherever you are politically, I mean wherever you are on the political spectrum, it's difficult not to make assessments of people based on your own intuitive sense of whether or not you think you would like them. When you see Donald Trump doing that, do you find it difficult to just kind of conjure up hatred and go like, oh, he must be a horrible, evil, racist, rapist person? You sort of see him around children and you think, hold on a minute, he seems really nice. Now, I can almost feel people that are determined to continue to dislike Donald Trump saying, well, Adolf Hitler was good with children. Adolf Hitler loved his dog Blondie. And at that point, you have to kind of acknowledge that you're enjoying hating someone. It's just something you like doing. It's not really based on reason. And almost at this point, how are any of us supposed to unpick the impact of propaganda on our own apparently personal perspectives on a variety of issues, whether that's Donald Trump as an individual or the complex subject of gender and gender politics? We have now reverted, as a result of the rise of the MAGA movement and Trump's presidency, to there are two genders. There are men and women, like in the book of Genesis. So what do you do if you are a caring and compassionate follower of Jesus Christ and says that Jesus Christ would love anyone, regardless of how they dressed or what they declared themselves to be? We can't make this content without the support of our partners. Here's a message from one now. Bioactive Complete Multivitamin for Men. I chose it because, like most people, I wasn't confident I was getting all the vitamins and minerals I need from my diet. Since I've started taking them, my overall health feels much more balanced. It's been a game changer for me. Live Good believe that everyone deserves access to high-quality supplements without the insane markups. They offer premium products formulated by an industry-leading team of natural health experts, and they cut out the middleman to sell them at the lowest prices anywhere. They also have organic super greens, yum, multivitamins, fantastic, collagen weight loss products, protein powder, creatine, detox, hormone products, and skincare products. All highest quality products at prices that people can actually afford. No wonder they're the fastest growing supplement brand on the planet with over 1.5 million customers and counting. 1.5 million in one, 1.5 million in two. See? Go to livegood.com/Russell and get 10% off your first order if you use my special code. Wait for it. Here it is. Russell. And you'll get 10% off your first order. Take the steps to getting healthy. Join the 1.5 million and 9 people and 10 that are members of this incredible movement. Live Good.
Secret Service is worried about them?
That kind of stuff is what I like about Donald Trump. Like, it sounds like someone in the background is going, oh no, you weren't meant to do this. Secret Service is worried about them. Like, there could be like a tiny little spy with a Sharpie pen with a blow dart in it. Got him. Ah! Oh no, my ear.
If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to do this? Watch what I do, then I'm going to give you some pens, okay?
I'm assessing here the easy affability of a figure like Trump that seems to me to be at odds with the declaration that he is sort of evil. If you watch someone like Keir Starmer and see how he is around people, there's a kind of resolute awkwardness, an inability to be at ease around people. And that don't mean that he's a bad person, but I would say it's likely that he's hiding something. He's not at ease. He's not fully comfortable with who he is. You all remember Joe Biden, or the variety of Joe Biden. Sometimes it appeared he had stand-ins sniffing around kids' heads, saying weird stuff all the time. Or Kamala Harris's weird and jarring, awkward dancing, all triangles and elbows spilling across a dance floor in an attempt to appear human and affable. What's curious, of course, is there's plainly some awareness of the PR perspective of this image because Donald Trump is signing what would have been regarded as a very controversial bill not that long ago, the protection of women's sports. But when you consider that someone like JK Rowling, and she's almost a peerless individual in Anglophonic and global culture because she's come up with the artifact of Harry Potter, which is basically sort of like Tolkien or something. There aren't many, Tolkien or George Lucas, there aren't that many people that have made cultural contributions that are that impactful and varied. Now, that also doesn't mean she's a brilliant person well, she's a brilliant person, but it doesn't mean that she's morally unimpeachable, of course. But it does mean you're dealing with an individual that in any sensible culture will be difficult to malign and condemn, particularly if they're saying something that doesn't seem that outrageous. In so much as I don't believe that JK Rowling ever hated trans people. I feel that JK Rowling was very interested in the rights of women. She's a single mum that's created a global phenomenon that's almost beyond compare, and she has a view on women's rights because she's kind of the age she is and would have gone through cultural moments where women are like, oh, like women aren't being paid enough, or women are maligned, or, you know, like, she wouldn't remember women not having a vote, but she'd have a sort of an understandable feminist perspective. And that's when sort of a lot of woke culture started to fall apart in the eyes of many people from a kind of common sense perspective. Hang on a minute, what do we do about, like, weren't we all supposed to be concerned about women's rights or gay people's rights? How come now we're advocating for the medicalisation of trans issues? If you care about, I suppose you do, you're watching me, my personal perspective, I believe in non-judgment and I believe in love. Those are my two principles that I would be guided by. I love it that trans people would come to my shows, but when, as a father, I think about how I would handle it if one of my kids said, I feel like I'm a boy trapped in a girl's body, I'd say, well, let's see how you feel. What do you mean by boy? What do you mean girls? What do you mean? Let's wait a while. We'll work this out when you're a little bit older, mate. It's probably what I would say. And let me know in the comments and chats let me know in the comments and chat what you would say as a parent or what you would say as a loving person. So it's complete non-judgment. But when it comes to your role as a person that is charged with the care of a younger individual, what stand would you take? And would you want the government intervening? I mention all of this because there's a conversation on Bill Maher between an MSNBC pundit and Maher himself on this subject that is interesting. Let's see a little more of Donald Trump signing this order.
You ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that.
I also like that Donald Trump's a person who assesses and evaluates the merits of his own signature. So we're going to do a good job, presses it down. I like, this is going to be a good signature, that he's got like a perspective on his own signature. Like, although it's quite trivial, I also see that as testimony to the sort of ludicrousness of the idea of Trump as a malign person, like an evil person, because it's so sort of human and sort of sweet to care about whether or not your signature is good and to have that kind of direct affinity and affability and relatability around kids. I just can't imagine a person like that withdrawing into some dreadful private place and going, oh, I hate N-words, or Rah. Now, of course, that sort of famous tape of grab them by the P word was an indication that there are levels to people, and indeed all sexual conduct is by its nature intimate and private. And when you bring all sexual conduct into the public sphere, I think it seems a little bit icky, even if it is, as it should be, entirely consensual with people that are able to give consent. So I would say this, when you watch Donald Trump around kids, doesn't it seem like he's in general a pretty lovely person? Let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat, even if you disagree with him politically and a whole host of things, and I'm sure any of us would if we were to scrutinise his political perspectives. But more important than that is, where do you stand on this issue of the protection of women's sports? And what does it mean when a culture can take someone like JK Rowling, a sort of like Walt Disney, like a person that you would think is a sort of an icon of a culture, a creator of the culture, abandon them, annihilate them, purder and condemn them, make them a pariah on the basis of opinions that are certainly like reasonable, like, in the same way that I would say, oh yeah, if you want to like be trans, that's none of my business and I'll call you whatever you want me to call you. Wouldn't you say that if a person says, no, I actually really believe in protecting women's spaces, you wouldn't go, like, the principle of tolerance can't be selectively applied. Otherwise, it's not tolerance. It's a kind of expedience. Wouldn't you agree? Let's have a look at Bill Maher's... wouldn't you agree? Let me know in the comments and chat. Let's have a look at Bill Maher's conversation with Chris Hayes, who seems to be a sort of semi-wake, liberalist MSNBC host who's advocating for a kind of my body, my choice perspective on the subject of trans care. Let's go back and look at what Chris Hayes was saying during the COVID pandemic. I bet he was all sorts of let's vax the hell out of these people, and if you're unvaxxed, you're a hater type stuff. I don't know. That's just an aspersion I'm casting on him without real evidential proof. So maybe I'll pause that for a moment. But let's have a look at his conversation with Bill Maher as the ongoing cultural conversation is explored on Bill Maher's Real Time.
But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call like common sense, patriotic pluralism.
Common sense, patriotic pluralism, i.e. patriotic. If you're going to have a country, it's going to have loads of people in it, like 330 million people in it, and they're not all going to believe the same thing. Okay. Common sense means that the idea of a universal reason. Now, to have universal reason, you have to have a higher principle, don't you? Even to make claims to common sense, you are sort of saying that there is a God. If you're not saying the word God because you're an atheist or a materialist or whatever, you are saying something that is compounded within the word God. There is an absolute reality, aren't you? Because otherwise you can't have common sense. You can't have common sense unless you're saying there's a consensual, universal, agreed upon reality.
Pluralism?
Yeah.
And pluralism, which at some point in this conversation, Chris Hayes says is a synonym for diversity, could also be considered a synonym for variety. Now, variety is beautiful. We have a variety of people, limitless variety in God's creation, limitless variety between all of us as nations, as tribes, as individual people. Diversity suggests opposition between those people. Pluralism is a kind of a word that indicates diaspora. Variety means we are all coming from a single center, one radiant creator, but we are different from one another and we respect these differences.
Yeah.
That is a majority message, which is like, if some father and mother have healthcare for their kid lined up who's trans, just stay the fuck out of their business.
Stay the fuck out of it. If some people don't want to get a vaccine because maybe they want to see more clinical data, mind your own business. Particularly if those vaccines haven't been clinically trialed against transmission, then there's no moral component anyway. Mind your own fucking business. Suddenly so cavalier. Suddenly so willing to say, I want the government out of my business. So extraordinary when the entire liberal movement was advocating for authoritarianism on the basis of protection and care. And who is more vulnerable than the children? I often think myself that I don't want, say for example, this is just a thought experiment. Should you be able to drive your car with your children with no seatbelt on if you consider that your driving is safe? Should you? Let me know in the comments and chat. I actually believe that I should be able to do that. I should decide for myself whether my children are safe in the car. Now, I know that there's many, many questions that could bounce back over the net at me. Well, what if another driver did something? Or what if your children being out of their seat caused them to do something in the car that made you swerve and But that seems to me to be the legitimization of authority rather than the advocacy for sensible authority. However, I would acknowledge that if there was ever a situation where you felt that parents were not correctly looking after their children or even were abusing their children, that you might want some authority to intervene. Would you say that's reasonable? So there is a point where even the belief that I don't think that I want anyone involved in my children's lives other than me and their mother, there's a point where you'd say, but what in instances where those children are being abused or exploited? Now that is the question that's used to legitimize state interventionism. And I would contest this, that therefore any authority has to either be divine or consensual, i.e. democratically elected within agreed parameters. You can't have state intervention unless it's sanctioned by God or mandate. We all agree on that. So let's see where this conversation goes.
Get the fuck out of their business.
Yeah, I'm in the audience at Bill Maher, and I think I heard something I believe in.
And let them make that decision. That's their decision to make. And you don't have to make that for your family. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your family.
But the argument is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid is...
Yes.
Thank you, one person who knows that.
But I mean...
Somebody knows that.
Significant difference there, perhaps. And I reckon if we agree that parents are ultimately responsible for their children, then perhaps you can make the argument that Chris Hayes is advancing there. Would you agree with that?
The case.
I think in the vast majority, we've been hearing from parents right now whose kids' medical care has been interrupted. I think there's a way to talk about...
Well, of course, they would say it's not medical care. They would say it's
what they're saying.
disfiguring a child.
I think they should mind their own business. I really do. I think they should mind their own business.
Where would the principle of minding your own business appear on a continuum that likely includes propagandization of certain issues? For example, have you noticed over the last 4, 6, 8, 10 years very public advocacy for gender realignment therapies? Have you noticed that? Has it gone beyond the expression of the very human, decent and godly right for individuals to be whoever they are, whoever they feel called to be by God, to express themselves lovingly as long as they're not harming others however they want, a key principle of freedom and salvation, and potentially moved into propagandization, pushing and advocating for those measures? One way to test that would be, are certain states experiencing higher rates of trans kids, and do those states more publicly advocate for trans issues? My children, I want them to be whoever they are, and if my children say to me, I believe that I'm a boy born in a man, in a whatever, if they don't agree with their sort of biological gender, inverted commas, then I'm going to support them to be whoever they are and whatever they want. But what I would do, and I would make a claim for common sense, is I would say we're going to wait for a little thing called puberty to happen and adulthood to happen, because your daddy was pretty crazy at various points in life, and I'm glad that I weren't able to make any permanent choices while I was a child, because they may not have been good choices, and you're growing up in an environment where certain things are being amplified perhaps unduly. So the principle has to be derived in a sense from a belief in God. Do you know what I mean? I'm saying love. As long as you're coming from a place of love, whether you're a family member or a participant in the politics of a nation, you're going to be okay. The problem comes when you believe in hate. Now, that's what everyone attributes to a figure like Donald Trump. He's hateful. He hates black people. He hates trans people. He hates women. Does he look hateful when you see him surrounded by children there, signing those things and sort of kind of dopily dishing out the pens? I don't know. You tell me in the comments and the chat. And any parent worthy of the name will do what's best for their children. So I would say, yeah, I don't want the state involved in my children, and I wouldn't command that the state get involved in other people's children. So, in a sense, there is some truth in what Chris Hayes is saying. But when you unpack and follow that, you have to start looking at what's been advocated for and propagandized publicly over the last 4 years. Is that a sensible question? Let me know what you think about that.
I think they should mind their own business. And I think that's true about a lot of things. I think there is this sense in which there was this sort of backlash politics, some of which I understood, some of which people I know felt that way.
So this conversation continues across time. And I reckon if we are tolerant and loving people who believe that our duty here is to spread the kingdom of heaven upon the earth through love and service of one another, we have to remain entirely open, but we have to be alert to the idea of propaganda and the impact of a culture on an individual. If a culture doesn't have an impact on an individual, why have a culture at all? Certainly a culture that would abandon a figure or annihilate or purder a figure like JK Rowling is a culture that needs a bloody good looking at, is what I would argue. And when you look at Donald Trump surrounded by kids, it's difficult to see the guy as evil. And if you're determined to see him as evil, then you might want to investigate where those ideas came from. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat? Comments and the chat. Wherever you're watching this, you can find us on Rumble Premium. That's our primary home. Consider getting Rumble Premium. You get additional content from me, Bongino, Crowder, Greenwald, a whole host of people, as well as supporting free speech. You can also watch Break Bread. Break Bread is a fantastic conversation. Break Bread is a fantastic show that I make. Here is an example of the conversations we have there.
So you always have to be on your alert because, there's corruption in the church. I live in Ireland. We've seen plenty of that here, right? So we know priests can be corrupt, hierarchies can be corrupt, people are fallen. But the process that's going on, I think, is real. I think it's real. And I know that I'm changed by it.
Now, if you're watching us on X or YouTube or wherever you're watching us, we are going to leave now and be exclusively over on Rumble. Before that, here's a quick message from one of our partners, without whom we can't make this show. Some companies stand for diversity quotas and ESG scores. 1775 Coffee stands for bold flavour, real quality, and the kind of work ethic that would get half of DC fired on day one. If your morning fuel should actually taste like coffee and not like the liquid equivalent of Biden's farts, you're in the right place. Dark roast hits harder than a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend fuels the fight with lion's mane, cordyceps, and reishi. Real energy, no synthetic garbage, straight from Bill Gates' lab. Yeah, real coffee for real Americans. Like me. Weak coffee is for the weak, and at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no shortcuts, and proudly backed by a platform that does not cut corners, water things down, or settle for mediocrity. For pods, whole bean, or ground coffee, head to 1775coffee.com, use the code BRAND for 15% off. If you're watching us on X or YouTube, wherever you're watching us other than Rumble and Rumble Premium or Locals, I love you, my friends on Locals, you are going to love our next guest. Our next guest is Gregg Hurwitz, whose new book, Nemesis, is out now. It's part of his Orphan X series. And the reason I like Gregg Hurwitz is he uses fiction to explore fascinating cultural ideas like freedom and liberty. He's a New York Times #1 bestseller, and he's also fundamentally involved in addressing political and cultural polarization, producing numerous commercials and writing op-eds for publications such as the Wall Street Journal and Guardian. So he's certainly operated within legacy media spaces and probably has fascinating insights, I would say, on a variety of cultural issues, all of which we'll be discussing in the upcoming conversation. Click the link in the description to join us for what's sure to be a fantastic conversation about culture and power. Gregg Hurwitz, thank you so much for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. Congratulations on your new book, Nemesis, which is out now. One of the things that I know you do brilliantly well is wrestle into the form of fiction, complex, contemporary, cultural conversation. Congratulations on that success. And thank you also for sending me that amazing graphic novel. It's really beautiful and fantastic. I love the variety of media that you're able to work in. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. New Think, that graphic novel I wrote a couple years ago. It's very much about, it's sort of a Black Mirror-like take on technology and addiction and all the ways that it's warping our brains.
Yes. Now, I wonder, Greg, how you have pivoted and altered your perspective. Because, I don't know, does everyone know about you that you actually were a student of Jordan Peterson? Do people know that about you? I didn't mention it in your introduction or anything. Is that common knowledge?
I think so. I mean, look, some people know, and people saw me on Exodus and the Gospels on the Daily Wire with him. So that was a big point of overlap. But yeah, we go all the way back to college. But no, I'm primarily known as a thriller writer. The Orphan X series, that's what Nemesis is, my new series. I do some screenwriting and comics. But Jordan and I have crossed enough publicly and otherwise that some people are familiar with that relationship. So we go all the way back to, I was 19 years old when we met, and, he looked like a lead singer in a boy band. He was like sort of hunky, psychology professor. He was incandescently sharp. And I took one course from him, personality psych, and then just signed up for everything. I did a young seminar with him that was life altering for me. And then he was my thesis advisor on the psychology side.
Oh my God. I mean, so you could sort of tell that you were dealing with a superstar academic even then. Were you a favorite? Because I know I've been in educational, and I know that, for example, I went to a drama school and we had a very, very charismatic principal, Christopher Face. And by the way, everyone there's training to be actors. So we lived for that guy's attention. Was Jordan Peterson the kind of professor that everyone was kind of clamoring to be a sort of favorite? And where did you rank?
I think I ranked pretty well. We got along really, really well. And yeah, I mean, there was something about him that was just foundationally different. I remember telling my college roommates back then, I said, look, if there's one professor, and I was at Harvard as an undergrad, back when that was still something to be proud of. And I remember, so we had some pretty great professors. I mean, Seamus Heaney was there teaching Yeats. I had Helen Vendler for English. I mean, it was extraordinary. But I remember saying to my roommates, if there's one professor who I have had here who I think will be remembered just by his last name in 100 years, it's going to be Jordan. It was going to be Peterson, like Ibsen or Chekhov or, Freud. There was something in his expansiveness of reach, and a lot of that was bringing together symbological and mythological structures of thinking with hard and intense science.
But one of the things that's so amusing to me is whenever you have these debates with like Sam Harris or somebody, they say, oh, well, Jordan is the sort of spiritual mythological thinker and Sam's the scientist. It's like Jordan is like a knockdown, no shit, hardcore scientist beyond anything. He's published hundreds of papers. I mean, so the thing about him that's so extraordinary is the depth of wisdom, knowledge, and grasp across a whole bunch of different topics, and then the ability to unify them. And I'd say this was also at a time when a lot of the great old professors were retiring. I had a professor named Roger Brown who taught, he's one of the fathers of social psychology, but he could quote Shakespeare at length. He was an expert in etiquette psychology, which is fascinating, literature and film. And he would retire, and somebody else would come along who was an expert on like one gene. And so we saw this sort of, condensation of these massively educated generalists who were also exceptional in particular fields to somebody who was, the specialist will be the generalist in the short term. And I think in Jordan, it was evident to me. I mean, my undergrad, I was English and psychology. I was writing about Shakespeare, but I did Freudian and Jungian analysis of Shakespeare, and I used him to contrast them. And it was clear that his brain could sort of go, anywhere through all these different fields while also pinning down his most obvious expertise. I mean, look, of all the things Jordan's brilliant at, he's brilliantest at being a psychologist. It's just staggering watching him work and move around that filter. And so, yeah, it was, to me, it was just clear as day all the way back then. So I like to think I discovered him, and I'm responsible in large part for his success.
Congratulations on that. Congratulations. Also, what's pretty interesting, not that we're going to spend the rest of our lives discussing this topic, but Jordan Peterson is in the kind of liberal publications that you've sort of written for, I think somewhat extensively, like The Guardian, a kind of a legacy media organization in my country, Wall Street Journal in your country. Are the kind of criticisms that are offered, projected, fired off at Jordan Peterson is that he's some kind of poor man's intellectual, that he somehow lacks veracity and depth and foundation, that he's like the stupid man's philosopher. Now, in a way, these are the kind of claims that make it difficult for me to take them seriously, because whatever you think of Jordan Peterson and the way that his story is played out culturally, it's pretty clear that he's a rigorous and brilliant intellectual.
Well, if you talk about he's a dumb person's idea of a smart person, it's pretty great. Yeah. It's like, that's what we call an educator. That's Jordan taking incredibly complicated ideas and boiling them down. But look, people have no idea. I mean, and I've been dealing with this a lot because, Jordan and I have been friends all the way back. I think it's part of why, even as somebody who had strong relationships coming from a liberal, and I say liberal, not progressive and not lefty, background and worldview, I've been undeceived from minute one about the dangers of the far left, in large part due to my relationship with Jordan. I saw everything that came for him. I saw the ways in which the filters went up, the ad hominem attacks increased, things were taken out of context, things weren't researched, people did, I don't need to read more about him than one stupid tweet. That defines the summation of everything who he is. And I sort of watched this idiocy come after and attack him. It tends to be combined with crushing moral sanctimony and an utter and comprehensive lack of curiosity. It sort of is a devastating combination of incompetence and lack of curiosity and sanctimony. And so I really had my eyes open, and part of the very fruitful engagement I've had with Jordan is that he's someone who's center, now leaning slightly right, whatever that means anymore, and I'm center but coming from a liberal perspective. We've done a lot of work in terms of trying to bridge things across the divide, because ultimately, we need to get this country in the West and Western democracies really unified, because there's a lot of people out there who love nothing more and are fueling us tearing ourselves into pieces as other hostile regimes and players and psychopathic algorithms are marching and making inroads. So we do need a solidity among us, and I've been working with him to do that. But yeah, I think there's very few people taken more out of context than him. And I think that a lot of the people who criticize him, when people say that, I always think, look, I could probably sit down, and if I drank, a cup of coffee, I could write down 100 topics that he could probably win an argument, an in-depth argument with people essentially dismissing him as a lightweight. It's just preposterous. I mean, dismiss him for other reasons. You know, he doesn't like baseball. You know, he uses the term bucko too much. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why we should eschew Jordan, but one of them is certainly not going to be lack of horsepower under the hood.
One of the arguments that he's been at the absolute forefront of, almost the sort of kind of harbinger of in some sense, are the cultural arguments that unfold around women's rights, protected spaces, and gender diversification, which has come to a kind of new head with Trump's recent executive order that women's sports will be protected. And we today talked about JK Rowling posting when she did the image of Trump surrounded by girls was a real positive thing that people that are engaged in the cultural war have sort of brought that out. Now, when we were unpacking that, Greg, I felt, here's what I felt. JK Rowling surely is a fearless individual when it comes to her creativity and cultural impact. Whether you want to look at that sort of economically or the sort of franchises that have flown out of her sort of individual endeavors. And any culture that would attempt to purge itself of her, malign and cancel her, must have a really kind of very particular purview and sense of itself. Because if you are interested in the kind of cultural pluralism that progressives claim to be interested in, you would surely be able to accommodate a female writer that could probably only really be compared to someone like Tolkien or Walt Disney. But you wouldn't like to go, well, she's out because she's interested in protecting women's spaces. What do you think like that when it comes to the issue of protecting women's spaces and trans issues, it tells us when JK Rowling can find herself now only re-sanctioned by the assent of a politician that most progressives are comfortable describing as being a contemporary Hitler?
You know, that's a superb question and fertile grounds for discussion. The first thing I'm going to say about J.K. Rowling is she's one of our predominant myth makers, and I'm going to get back to why that's important. She's also, I don't want to say single-handedly, so let's think of an adjective that takes some of the absolutism off that, largely responsible for an entire generation of readers. And so as somebody who's a novelist, novels are my main, this is my 25th or 26th novel. This is my career. I've watched her build out an entire readership. The Harry Potter books start at a somewhat more simple level onboarding people, and they grow more sophisticated and a bit darker as they go. She's been an extraordinary cultural impact. She's done a ton for women's rights, children's rights. She was homeless for a brief time. And I think one of the things that is really important, I also want to frame what her actual perspective was. Her actual statement was, I believe in trans rights, meaning if you are trans and you are being prosecuted or persecuted because you are trans, I will literally march with